So, it is time for round 2 of book versus movie. And the topic is The Goldfinch. That is right, I finished the book of The Goldfinch. I have now watched the movie of The Goldfinch. I am ready for a comparison because believe me, there is a lot to compare. So, the layout is as usual. We do 2 similarities of the book and the movie, 2 differences of the book and the movie, and then what I did last time was 2 pros of the book or 2 pros of the film. And this time I decided to do it a little bit differently and just change up the words and say basically what the book did better and what the film did better. And then I'll end by giving the book an overall rating and the movie an overall rating, and we will see which one wins. So, the first of the similarities to discuss. The character in the book, Xandra. Now, Xandra, spelled with an X, is very important. Xandra is Theo, our main character's stepmother, and she is the girlfriend of Theo's father. He shows up a bit later into the book to claim Theo from the Barbour family, who I've spoken a lot about in my review of The Goldfinch. And they take Theo to live with him. And the character of Xandra is one that you hate. I hated the woman. I hated her with a passion. I felt like she was selfish, she was arrogant, she cared for nothing but herself. She was not mother material. She didn't want a child and then she got lumbered with the child. So I kind of understand it a bit. But although I hated her, she is one of them characters that I couldn't help but love. Because despite the fact that she was a horrible person, she was hilarious. She was really funny. And she was just it made me think, there is no way this is going to transfer from book to movie. It's just, I don't think it can be done because I've pictured her in a certain way to make her not as bad as perhaps she could be perceived. And I made her into a horrible but funny horrible person. And I didn't expect much from it. Then I watched the movie and I found out Xandra is portrayed by Sarah Paulson in the movie. Amazing actress. She's absolutely fantastic. Honestly, big her up for this role because she did everything that I needed. She made her funny. She didn't do anything that made the character hilarious, but she portrayed her in a way where despite all the bad things she was doing, despite the lack of care she gave to Theo, I couldn't hate her. I really couldn't. And she did it so well. So honestly, props to her for that because that was difficult. So well done, Sarah Paulson. But that was the first similarity and it transferred so well. So excellent. Now, the second similarity that I have to discuss is the relationship between our main character Theo and a character called Boris. Now, I love Boris and Theo. I absolutely love the relationship. Honestly, it's not the best relationship, don't get me wrong. Their friendship is based off drinking, taking drugs, smoking, and basically just being little annoying teenagers. They don't have a strong relationship when it comes to other things. That's basically their relationship. But I cared so much for them. When I was reading the book, I shipped Boris and Theo so much. I wanted them to be in a relationship. I love them. And the friendship that developed from those 2 characters. And, oh, wow, you couldn't criticize it. I absolutely loved it. I felt that the relationship developed so well from strangers to the fact that Boris calls him Potter. The fact that Boris calls Theo Potter because he looks like Harry Potter. And they build a very male relationship. They build a relationship of 2 stereotypical boys. They fight because it's funny. They're never nice to each other. They just call each other names all the time. And they can be aggressive. But it works because that's what the male relationship is. And I've actually spoken to people who have read the book or watched the movie, and they've said, I didn't expect men to have that type of relationship. I thought such close bonds were only really for women. I was like, oh, didn't expect that. But that relationship transferred to the film. And again, it was just so well done. It was excellent. I couldn't fault them for anything. The characters, the actors in the movie, the characters in the book, I couldn't fault anything about the relationship. It was developed so well. It transferred so well. And honestly, some of these characters in the film, it makes it such a good film. Honestly, I would recommend watch this film. I don't really like recommending films when I'm doing a book channel, but film, recommend it. Watch it, honestly. Because I love the book. I thought the book was fantastic. And I hate book to movie adaptations because I think it is never done well. There are very few instances where it's done well. And I think that this was one of the very few instances where the movie was done well. So honestly, watch the movie. Read the book, watch the movie, do a comparison. Do what I'm doing. It's great. Now, the differences. And the differences annoyed me. So, the main difference, and it wasn't necessarily bad. It worked well for the film, but I didn't like it. They showed, because bit of background, as I mentioned in the review, as I mentioned in my weekly vlogs, pretty much all the time, it follows a timeline. It follows young Theo through his life, and then it follows adult Theo. And in between, there's a bit of a time jump. I think it's about 8 years, something like that. And it was in the book, it was very linear. You got to see it. You got to see Theo grow up, time jump. You got to see Theo as an adult. In the film, they decided, we can't do that. That might be a bit boring. And I understand, because honestly, it could be. So what they did was they showed adult Theo and young Theo at the same time. They just had segments from adult Theo, and then it was kind of like a bit of a flashback to how he was as a young person. And it worked for the film. It really did work for the film, but it didn't work for me. And I feel as though the main reason it didn't work is because it took away a lot. It took away a sense of, oh, I wonder, is this character going to come back? Or I wonder how Theo turns out then. Like, when he lived with the Barbos, who are called Barber in the film. No. They are too posh for Barber. It is Barbor. I have decided. I don't care what anyone says, it is Barbor. So when he lived with them and then got taken away to live with his dad and Xandra, I was like, oh no, his life is going down the drain. He's ruined it. Everything is destroyed. And then we got to see what happened a bit later on. And it wasn't destroyed and it was great. But then in the film, you see that he's not a crumbling mess of a person. You see that he's actually doing quite well. You see that he goes back to Hobie before you get to learn it. You know he's there before you actually see him go back. And you're just like, you've just taken away such an emotional part of the book. Him going back to New York, him going back to the life that he had to lose because his dad took him away, and going back to one of the only people in New York, in his hometown, who actually cared about him. And you got to see the reunion. It was all there, but it was just out of the linear narrative that I liked, and we knew it was happening before it happened, and it took the emotion away. And you're just like, no, why? Why did you do this? It was sad. It really was. Honestly, it was sad. Okay, sorry for that. The second difference, and I really am not happy about it, is the movie did the Theo and Pippa relationship dirty. It really did. In the book, Theo met Pippa when he went to Hobart and Blackwell's, the antique shop, and he met Pippa. She was recovering from the accident. She didn't even remember him. And over time, he said, "Can I please come back and see her again?" Because he saw her in the accident and he cared a lot about this girl. He pretty much fell for her. And then he met her again and she didn't remember him, and he wanted to keep going back to hopefully make her remember him and honestly just maybe build something. And he found a family in them. And he kept going back week after week, week after week. He kept going back, or day after day, or whenever it was. He went back a lot. And then she had to move away. Then, as adults, well, not even as adults, when Theo moved back to New York, she came and visited over Christmas and Thanksgiving and other holidays. She just came and visited. And you got to see their relationship develop slowly over time, and it was so adorable. You could see Theo fall in love with her. You could see them become best friends. And that didn't happen. In the movie, he met her once when she'd just been recovering from the accident. She didn't remember him, and then she pretty much just moved away the next day, like as it does in Filmland. Yeah, so she moved away the next day. Really, just makes me think, well, they didn't really have a relationship. He met her once, she'd gone then. So that's how it was. And then years later, we only saw her like twice more. We saw her once with that guy I don't remember the name of, the guy she's dating, she's moved to London with him. And then you saw her when she had a bit of a breakdown with Theo, and I'm like, okay. Both of those meetings were very important. They were both in the book. They both give everything we needed to. For the sake of the film, it gave what it needed to. But if they did it how it was done in the book, they could have given it so much more. They could have given it so much more. And it would have developed this relationship so much. And they did it dirty. They did it dirty. The movie did it dirty. Donna Tartt, you shouldn't have let them do it. Honestly, their relationship and how that developed over the time was phenomenal, and I loved it. I loved it from start to finish, and I felt like the movie really, really dropped the ball. It really did. So now it's time for two things that the book did better. So thinking about what the book did better, the main one, most importantly, is the terrorist attack. The terrorist attack. Theo's mother dies in a terrorist attack. We see the terrorist attack. We see the impact that had on Theo. We see the impact that had on Pippa. We see all of that. And it leaves you with so many emotions, and it breaks you. It broke me. It really broke me, that. For me, when I read that in the book, I was there. I could feel it. I could see the dead bodies. I knew the horror that he was going through. And in the movie, you lose the emotional impact. And so much happens. Honestly, this terrorist attack, so much happens in it. Theo meets Pippa. Theo says the last words he'll ever say to his mother. Theo's mother dies. Theo meets Pippa's uncle, Welty, and gets the ring that sends him to Hobart and Blackwell. Theo talks to him about Pippa. Theo gets the painting. Gets the painting. The Goldfinch painting. The bloody painting that the entire movie is about. And the entire book is about. That all happens during the terrorist attack. And they just kind of showed it in little bits, giving this little bit of information, a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here. And you're like, and? I didn't... Look, I watched it, so I knew, but I watched this book... Wait. I watched this film with my mother. I watched it. We watched it together. She loved it. I loved it. But she didn't know until about an hour and a half into the movie that Theo actually stole the painting. She didn't know. Because at the start of the book, it tells you that's exactly what he does. You see him do it. In the movie, no, not that important. He's got a painting, yeah, the Goldfinch painting. We know all about that, but we're not going to tell you he stole it till near the end. So yeah, it very much angered me. The book definitely did it better. You got so much of the emotional impact. You got all of the information you needed right at the very start. And then the film just showed you little clips and it took so much away. You didn't even see what Theo's mother looked like until the end. You just saw the back of her head. You didn't get any of the emotional impact. And it angers me so much. And yeah. So, the second thing that the book did better, and I think I mentioned it a bit when I was talking about doing Pippa and Theo dirty, the relationship between Theo and Pippa was definitely done better in the book. I've gone into a bit of a spiel about that. I will not repeat it. But the Barbeau family, I cry when I think of that family because I love them so much. They mean so much to me. In the book, Theo goes to live with them. You know that they are not close with Theo. One of the Barbeaus, Andy, used to be Theo's good friend, and then they just kind of grew apart and separated. But after the terrorist attack, when Theo realised, I've got no one else in the world, who can I go to? It's Andy. He wants to go to Andy. And Andy's family take him in. And Mrs. Barbeau and Mr. Barbeau, they are the loveliest people. Considering their wealth and status, you expect them to be so snooty, and they are not. Mrs. Barbeau is one of the most precious characters on earth. She honestly is. She cares so much for him. She treats Theo as though he is one of her own. Mr. Barbeau is really unwell. He has a lot of mental issues. He's a very ill man, but he is so lovely, and it means so much. As someone who works with mental health, it meant a lot to see the family dynamic with someone with a mental health issue. That it wasn't easy, that it's difficult, but it was portrayed. It was portrayed so well, and I loved it. I loved their relationship. But in the film, you saw Mr. Barbeau like once or twice. I think you saw him once when Theo first moved in, and then once at a family meal, and that was it. You lost so much of Mr. Barbeau, and it was such an important thing. It was such an important part. The reason when Theo went back to New York after losing his dad, he was going to go back to the Barbeaus, I hope. That's how I read it. He was going back to the Barbeaus. He saw Mr. Barbeau in the park, tried to talk to him, but because Mr. Barbeau's mental state was not right, it scared Theo, and Theo thought, I can't go back to them, not now. And that's why he went to Hobie instead. Whereas in the film, that was missing because Mr. Barbeau was hardly there. But I just felt we spent so much time in the book with them. We spent probably the first half of the book with the Barbeaus. And in the film, they was probably in it initially for about 20 minutes of the film. You didn't really get to see much of them. Really, at this point, I also have to just say big up Theo and Andy's friendship, because that was something excellent. Portrayed well in both book and film. But I think the film actually probably had the edge with that one. But now it's time for what I think the film did right. Now, those points that I've mentioned, they did cause me a lot of stress. They caused me a lot of anger. I will not lie. It really did. But for the most part, the movie was phenomenal. They did so much right. And what I'm about to say that they did better, honestly, incomparable. So much better. Right. The first thing I have to say the film did better, and it's not something really that can be criticised in the book. I just think the film obviously will have done it better. The young actors of this movie, honestly, honestly, the young lad that played Theo, the young lad that played Andy, the young lad that played Boris, the young girl that played Pippa, all of them, they were phenomenal. Phenomenal in the roles. They got it right down to a T on how I pictured them in my head. As adults, in the nicest way, it was portrayed well. Don't get me wrong. As adults, it was definitely portrayed well. But I felt as though as adults, it was partially the main character, the main adult Theo was portrayed by Ansel Elgort, and he's a good actor. He's fantastic, but he's known for he's a celebrity. He's very well known. Whereas some of the younger actors, I think, with the exception of Finn Wolfhard, who's obviously known for Stranger Things and It and loads of other films, they were relatively unknown, so I didn't have any preconceptions of, oh, I know this person from this place, and I just saw them as them characters, and they did such a good job. They were phenomenal. They really got every character down to a T. So big up the young actors, because honestly, they were perhaps even better than I pictured them when I read the book. They portrayed so well, especially the lad that played Theo. Honestly, I could not picture Theo. I struggled. All the way through, I couldn't get it into my head that Theo had glasses. When I read it and they kept calling him Potter and they mentioned that he has glasses on, I was like, no, not in my head. No, he doesn't. But it was so important to the story that he had glasses. But in my head, I was like, no, he doesn't. And then the film, this young lad came along and he was amazing. Honestly, the young actors in this film made it such a success. They were fantastic. Big up all of them. Now, this is going to be very spoiler filled, this last bit, but the second thing I think the movie did better was it gave more of an indication of how the ending was going to go. It did. And again, it was down to the fact that part of the film process is you can do things without giving it away. In a book, if you mention something, any reader that likes looking for certain tidbits like that will know where you're going with it. So if you don't want to give it away, you don't include it. Whereas the film, it didn't matter as much, and it worked so well. You know what? I'm just going to tell you a lot of the spoiler. Basically, when they were younger, Boris stole the painting from Theo. That Theo stole from the museum. Anyway, Boris stole it from Theo, and then as an adult, Boris and Theo meet again. Boris admits that he stole the painting. Theo, in all the time, never once opened the painting. You can hear my rant about that in the spoiler section of my review of The Goldfinch. But yes, Boris stole the painting. Boris told Theo, and then they go and get it back and all that. The ending of that really isn't that important. But when Theo was leaving and saying goodbye to Boris, and he took the painting out and put it in his bag, you could see it on Boris's face. Well, I could, knowing what I knew, I could see it. But the film did it really well. They took Boris's face. They showed Boris's face, looking but not looking, knowing that he had taken the photo. They had a moment before Theo left with Boris saying that he has to tell him something. Stay one more day because there's something so important I have to talk to you about. And it was the fact that he took the painting. And it gave it so much, it made the ending so much clearer. It didn't just come from nowhere. Whereas my main criticism of the book is that the ending just came from nowhere. Boris suddenly showed up like, oh yeah, stole your painting by the way, let's go get it back. And I was just sat there like, what? When the hell did you do that? I didn't understand it. I didn't like it. But the film gave you hints. It made it clear this is happening. And if you read the book, you'd have seen it and you'd have been like, Oh, so that's when it happened. I get it now. And it honestly, it made me understand the ending so much more. And I have such a deeper appreciation for how the story ended. Now, I still don't like the ending. I still think it was not necessarily where I wanted it to go. But I have more of an appreciation for it, and it made me dislike the ending less. It really did. So, really, the main things I think the film did better, probably not possible in a book, which feels like a bit of a cheat. Because the young actors and giving away a hint like that you couldn't really give away in a book. It's not really stuff that can be given away in a book, which means really the movie had an unfair advantage with it. But it made me love the movie so much because it gave me a lot that I needed. It really did. Especially picturing young Theo and especially getting that explanation from Boris that I needed. So, now I decided overall, because I read the book as part of my book club, so I decided to do that anyway. I gave the book a 7 out of 10 rating. And I thought, this is how I do it. I'm going to give you a bit of an explanation on how I rate these things, just so I'm not just saying this is what I give it, this is what I give it. I rate books in 2 parts. I give it an out of 5 rating for the story, how well it progressed, how natural it felt, the characters, everything like that. And then out of 5 for how it was written. For example, the writing style, any cliche tropes, etc., things like that I perhaps weren't a big fan of. So I gave the writing part of this book a 3 out of 5. Because although I had a lot of issues with the writing style, I felt as though it was done very well. At the start of the book, I felt, although it was over descriptive, it was needed at the start. You got to see the impact of the terrorist attack because of that. You got to see how Theo processed it. You got to see a lot, and that was so important. So the over descriptiveness, the writing style of it, everything, there was no cliche. It was perfect. It was perfectly done. I adored it. And then that continued. And then it just became less important, but it was still there. So it kind of lost a few points for... It's a shame, because you don't want to change writing style halfway through, but at the same time, it became unnecessary. And that's where I think it lost its points. In the second half of the story, there was a lot more action and things where you're like, well, if you add so much description, you're going to slow the pace down dramatically. And that is what happened, sadly, for me. I felt as though the pace dropped. And I struggled to get through the last portion of it because I felt like it was just too descriptive and it was just dragging on. And I just wanted to get to the point. And that's why it lost. But it was so important at the start. So it got a solid 3. And I think that's a very decent rating out of 5. And then the story portion. I felt the story deserved a 4 because the story was fantastic. I think, as I've said, the ending, not where I wanted it to go, but it was very solid. So it got a 4 out of 5. It would have got a 5 had the ending gone where I wanted it, but it didn't. It was still very good, so that got a 4. Overall then, my rating for the book is 7 out of 10. Now, I rate the movie this way. Yes, I rate the movie out of 10, out of 5 for how it compares to the book. How much of the book translates, what was left out, was it really that important, what the characters were like, do I see them that way, things like that. I give that an out of 5 rating. And I felt as though it was a solid 4 for that. A lot of it did come across the same. It come across well. The characters were phenomenal. Honestly, great film. There were a few differences that I weren't a big fan of, but overall, it translated well from the book to the film. And I was glad of that. And then the last portion, out of 5, I rate the film based on how it would stand had I not read the book. Because I think that's how you need to judge films. If you base it off the book, you're obviously going to make comparisons. You'll obviously not like it more because of this thing, or you'll obviously love it more because of this thing. So I also rate it based off the fact that, had I not read this book first, how does it stand? Does it make sense? Or have they just tried so much to fit everything in but missed out important parts of the book that the story doesn't actually make that much sense? And overall, I felt that did well. I felt as though it is a good standalone film. My mum had never watched it, and we watched it together, as I mentioned, and she loved it. She thought it was fantastic. So I gave the movie a... Well, I wasn't going to make it that easy and tell you, was I? Okay, so I gave the book 7 out of 10 because I felt it was a very strong book, very good. The ending let it down. The writing style at the end let it down a bit. But overall, very strong, definite, would recommend. Now the movie, as a standalone movie without reading the book, excellent. Did so well. Excellent. As an adaptation from the book, excellent. I thought it was great. So I gave the movie a 8. So that means movie wins. Woo! Yes, I felt that the movie of the Goldfinch was better. I struggled with this for a long time. I felt as though, was the movie really better? Because I had so many complaints about why I preferred the book. But overall, there wasn't a part of the film that I sat and I felt, I'm not enjoying this. Now, I had a discussion. I also got help from my mother with this. As I've said, we watched it together, but she's not read the book. So I had to get a lot of my perceptions from her because everything I was thinking, I don't like this in the film because of this. I kept thinking, well, it's the only reason I don't like it because it was different to the book. And standing on its own, it did do well. It just wasn't as good as the book. So after speaking to my mother, I realised it stood pretty well. It really did. And overall, that's where I got my rating from. I felt as though the book was excellent. The ending let it down. I felt as though the movie was amazing. Not much let it down. The only things that let it down were the fact that it missed elements of the book. But as a standalone film, without reading the book, it was really well done. Honestly, it was so well done, and I cannot recommend the movie enough. And yeah, so it is 1-1 now. Book 1, movie 1. I wonder what's going to be next. Who will win? We will see when I do round 3. So thank you all guys for watching. I really appreciate the fact that you watch these videos. Please drop a comment down. Let me know what you think. And if you have any other book to films that you want me to do a comparison on, please comment. I really want to read more and watch the films and do comparisons. I really enjoy doing this series. I think it's one of the fun series that I really do enjoy doing. So please, please, please give me some suggestions. I would really appreciate that. So again, thank you all so much. Make sure you click the subscribe button and also check out my my other one, my Peter Pan movie to book comparison. Check out all the other videos as well. And I post every Monday, Wednesday and Saturday. So until next time, I will see you then.